Hello everyone, it's Kat, and tonight I'm going to be showing you some of my plant collection. So I have more than 50 plants with plans to buy more. So what we're going to be seeing here tonight is just a small fraction. Most of this information that I'll be sharing with you tonight comes from a combination of my own learnings, Wikipedia, and other online sources, which I'll do my best to link in the description down below. I find talking about my plants super fun and super relaxing, so I'm hoping that you guys will get the same enjoyment out of it. But first, let's go ahead and light a candle and say our affirmations for the evening. Tonight's candle is flower themed. You can see it says Spring Market. It's got all these lovely decals on it. It also smells like wildflowers, so it's very appropriate for our theme tonight. So now on to our affirmations. I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. I am enough. I am protected. I am protected. I am protected. I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. I am a human having a human experience. I am a human having a human experience. I am a human having a human experience. I am no better or worse than anyone else. I am no better or worse than anyone else. I am no better or worse than anyone else. I am loved. I am loved. I am loved. Okay, and so now let's blow out our candle and let's start talking about plants. Okay, so two of the things I want to introduce you to are this handy little pair of plant shares, which I got on Etsy. And that's in the case that we need to give any of our plants a little trim or a haircut. It's starting to be growing season again here in the Northern Hemisphere. And so what that means is that a lot of plant parents like me are going to be doing what's called propagation with their plants. And that's when you take one plant and from that you can make many plants. Typically, the way that's done is by using something like this to take a cutting, placing it in water or soil, and then waiting until that forms roots. From there, you just plant it in soil or the potting medium of your choice. I'm not anticipating we'll need to use these tonight, but better safe than sorry. And then this is my handy dandy plant mister. I use this all the time, all day long, whenever I know that my plants are looking a little wilted or I think that they could use a bit of a pick-me-up, or even while I'm bored working from home. So this is great, and I suspect we will be using this because I love the sound, and I suspect that you guys will too. Okay, so this is our first plant. This is a Dracaena janetcraig, or Dracaena fragrans. Dracaena fragrans is a slow-growing, flowering shrub that tends to have, when it's young, one stem at the base that then grows into multiple as it gets older. Mature specimens can reach 15 meters, 49 feet or more tall, with a narrow crown of usually upright branches. Dracaena fragrans is a slow-growing shrub, usually multi-stemmed at the base, with mature specimens reaching 15 meters, 49 feet tall or more tall, with a narrow crown of slender, upright branches. Some stems may reach up to 30 centimeters or 12 inches on old plants. In forest habitats, they may become horizontal with erect side branches. Young plants have a single unbranched stem with a rosette of leaves at the top. And that will continue growing until the tip flowers or is damaged in some way. After that, it will branch, producing 2 or more branches after each subsequent flowering or after each branch is itself damaged. The leaves are glossy, green, lanceolate, 20 to 150 centimeters long and 2 to 12 centimeters wide. Small leaves are more upright, and bigger leaves are usually drooping under their weight. The flowers are produced in panicles from the top of the plant. A panicle is a loose cluster of flowers, basically. And the flowers can be 15 to 60 centimeters long. Well, the branch that they form on can be that long. The individual flowers tend to be about 2.5 centimeters, 0.98 inches in diameter, with a six-lobed corolla, which is pink at first, and then it opens with white, and then has a fine red or purple dot in the center. The central line of the sort of purple or pink in the center is 7 to 12 millimeters. The flowers typically are highly fragrant and popular with pollinating insects. The fruit is an orange-red berry, 1 to 2 centimeters in diameter, containing several seeds. This is a miniature one, and I've actually had it since before I really knew how to take care of plants. This plant is a trooper, and it has been through some shit, guys. I had this plant in my junior year of college, and I cared for it so poorly that I honestly thought that it was dead, even when I had other plants and was taking care of those really well and really regularly. Because this had stopped putting out any new growth, it wasn't doing anything, it just got watered once a week, and that was it. I thought it was just dead, but had kept some of the color in its leaves, so it had essentially become a faux plant. But I kept watering it, I was persistent, I repotted it, and when I moved to my new apartment in August, this moved to a spot where it got a lot more light. And guess what happened? It came back from the dead. It started putting out all these new leaves. You can see where these darker leaves are the growth, and you can see some of the crispy ends where I did not care for it properly, compared to all of this lighter yellow-green growth in the center, which is all these new leaves. It's just been sprouting and sprouting out. I really think this plant is going to continue to do very well, and I'm so excited for it. So, let's give this plant a celebratory mist and move on to the next one, shall we? So, let's give this plant a celebratory mist and let's move on to the next one, shall we? Okay, so let's start with our next plant. Plant number 2 that I'm going to be showing you guys tonight is a Sansevieria fernwood. So Sansevieria is a name for the type of plant also called a snake plant or a mother-in-law's tongue. They're very popular, they're very, very difficult to kill, but this one is a little bit special. So you may notice that this probably doesn't look like the snake plant you have in your house, or maybe it does, I don't know your life. But you can see here that what this plant has are these sort of long tubular stems with this convex center. So you can see that it almost looks like it's been hollowed out in the middle. And that's how we know it's a fernwood. This plant is often mistaken for Sansevieria bacularis, which is a plant in the same genus, in the same family, except it doesn't have that hollowed out center. It's just a perfect circle all the way around. So when we see these little indents, we know that it is not Sansevieria bacularis, but a Sansevieria fernwood. This plant is actually a rescue. It was not doing very well in someone else's care, and for a snake plant, that's saying a lot. So I was able to take it and able to help it. You can see it is slowly putting out some new growth. I'm not sure if you can see it in the center there. We're starting to see some lighter green leaves, and eventually those will push up to the top and become these bigger stems like you see here. It's quite slow growing, which I don't mind. It's very nice, very low maintenance. It's been living on the floor of my bedroom very happily since I got it around this time last year, so I'm very proud of this little guy. Sansevieria fernwood is an evergreen perennial plant, forming in dense stands, spreading by way of its creeping rhizome, which is sometimes above the ground, sometimes underground. Its stiff leaves grow vertically from a basal rosette. Mature leaves are dark green with light gray-green cross-banding, usually ranging from 70 to 90 centimeters long and 5 to 6 centimeters wide, though it can reach heights of 2 meters in optimal growing conditions. The plant enhances oxygen and carbon dioxide using the crasulian acid metabolism process, which allows them to withstand drought. Microscopic pores on the plant's leaves, called stomata, and used to exchange gases, are only opened at night to prevent water from escaping via evaporation in the hot sun. As a result, oxygen stored is released at the opening of the stomata at night, unlike most plants, which exchange continuously throughout the day. It is believed to be native to Asia and Africa and an island in Madagascar, and in some parts of northern Australia, it's considered a weed. The more you know. Okay, we're going to mist this one very lightly. It does not like to be overwatered. And now, let's see our next friend. Now, I know we already talked about easy to care for plants with the last two, but this one is the one I really recommend to anyone who is new to plants, who maybe doesn't quite know where to start, who is really afraid that they'll kill something, and maybe has killed a few plants in the past. So what I recommend, if that's the case for you or someone you love, are these, and I don't know how well you can see them, but these are what are called Marmo moss balls, and I'll talk a little bit more about them, their life, and what they're like. So these mosses are a rare growth form of Agagropylia lineae, a species of filamentous green algae, in which the algae grow into large green balls with a velvety or fluffy appearance. The species can be found in a number of lakes and rivers in Japan and in northern Europe. Colonies of Marmo balls are known to form in Japan and Iceland, but the population has been declining. Marmo were first described in the 1820s by Anton E. Sauter, found in Lake Zell, Austria. The genus Agagropylla was established by Frederick T. Kunzing, 1843, with A. lineae as the species based on its formation of spherical aggregations, but all the Agagropylla species were transferred to the subgenus Agagropylla of the genus Cladophora, later by the same author, Kunzing, 1849. Subsequently, A. lineae was placed in the genus Cladophora in the Cladophorales and was renamed Cladophora agagropylla. Extensive DNA research in 2002 returned the name to Agagropylla lineae. The presence of chitin in the cell walls makes this distinct from the genus Cladophora. The plant was named Marmo by Japanese botanist Taika Kawakami in 1898. Mari is a bouncy play ball, and mo is a generic term for plants that grow in water. The native names in the Ainu in Japan are Torasampe, lake goblin, and Tokorip, lake roller. They are sometimes sold in aquariums under the name Japanese moss balls. although they are unrelated to moss. In Iceland, the lake balls are called skoskitjörkola, which is ball and the word for muck by local fishermen, at Lake Mitvjan, where muck is any weeds that get tangled or caught in fishing nets. The generic name for Agagropilla in Greek means goat hair. The growth rate of Marmo is about 5 millimeters or 0.2 inches per year. In Lake Alkan in Japan, they grow particularly large, up to 20 to 30 centimeters, 8 to 12 inches. The round shape of the Marmo is maintained by a gentle wave action that occasionally turns it. The best environment for it are shallow lakes with sandy bottoms. The moss balls are green all the way around, which guarantees they can photosynthesize no matter which side is turned upwards. They're really unique and very interesting plants. I found that due to their natural environment, they prefer places that are a little bit cooler, and as long as you remember to change the water about every month or so, you're usually pretty set. I prefer to use filtered water in mine. So this is a Chamaedorea elegans, the Neanthipella palm or parlor palm. This one's got a lot of names. And this small palm is native to the rainforests Chamaedorea elegans, the Neanthipella palm or parlor palm, is a small palm tree native to the rainforests in southern Mexico and Guatemala. The parlor palm is one of the most heavily sold houseplant palms in the world. It is one of several species with leaves that are harvested as chete, fronds commonly used for flower arrangements, including Palm Sunday services and funeral decorations. This plant has gained the Royal Horticultural Society's Award of Garden Merit, which awards plants that do well in the UK's indoor growing conditions. It's a woody, rhizomous plant with slender green trunks, and it's found in tropical areas and typically grows to be 2 to 3 meters, 6 foot 7 inches to 9 feet 10 inches tall, rarely, and it will grow to 4 to 5 meters. It has crescent-shaped leaves, erect buds, flexible tubular stems without spines, and generally pinnate foliage. These plants can flower, though it is relatively rare in an indoor environment. The small light yellow, or orange-red flowers are quite odorous and appear on irregularly branched petioles that grow below or among the leaves. They emerge from the trunk as lateral buds and open in the form of clusters without petals. They have a certain resemblance to those of the mimosa. Occasionally, pea-sized berries develop after flowering. This plant is often cultivated in temperate regions as a houseplant and in gardens in the southern United States, where it grows to be 2 meters with very slow growth. It is the most often planted and sold in batches of 5 to 30 seedlings, just like we see here. Over time, a few emergent plants will begin to dominate and slowly weed out the weaker ones, so they will absorb all the light from the top, and eventually the ones at the bottom really won't be able to absorb any more light, and so naturally they'll fade away. It can tolerate low levels of humidity and light, though it prefers medium to high humidity and bright indirect light. Chamaedorea elegans is intolerant of frost and must be kept indoors in winter in non-tropical climates. It enjoys light potting soil, good humidity, and moderate lighting without direct sunlight, but it accommodates a certain dryness, high humidity, and or reduced lighting in winter. It is preferable that the temperature of the room it's housed in does not drop below 12 to 14 degrees Celsius. The plant was successful in the Victorian era because it survived the dark, unheated British apartments and greenhouses, which were used to grow and cultivate exotic plants, a practice fashionable at the time. In its natural rainforest setting, the parlor palm grows in competition with vines and is sometimes seen growing along rock walls, which can provide support. Due to the thinness of the stem, in nature, the parlor palm sometimes falls over during storms. If grown in the open, the rhizomatic roots can regrow from a fallen position in mature plants if it has grown adventitious roots. There are believed to be two naturally occurring subspecies of the parlor palm. One has a thinner stem and tends to grow at lower elevations, while the highland variety tends to have a thicker stem. There are also a few other cultivars, which are distinguishing characteristics such as the dark-leaved version, but these are very rare, and the vast majority sold in stores are the standard bright green one, like I have here. Like we said, this plant enjoys high humidity, so I'm going to mist her and allow us to move on. Next up, we have a silver pothos, or Scindapsus pictus. It's also known as a silver vine. It's a species of flowering plant in the arum family, Arseniae, and it's native to India, Bangladesh, Thailand, Peninsular Malaysia, Borneo, Java, Sumatra, Sulawesi, and the Philippines. These can grow to 3 meters, 10 feet tall in open ground, and it's an evergreen climber. They are matte green and covered in silver blotches. The insignificant flowers are rarely seen in indoor growing conditions. So, it talked a little bit there about the variegation on this plant. Some of you may know what variegation is, some of you may not. Variegation is any coloring on a plant which is not the coloring of the rest of the plant or leaf. So if you've ever seen a plant that has white stripes, that's variegation. If you've ever seen a plant that has white splotches on its leaves, that's variegation. Typically, variegation is for leaves and foliage only. It doesn't apply to flowers. So, what it was talking about there when it said variegation was instances like this. I don't know how well you can see it in these lighting conditions, but can you see those little silver splotches all over the leaf there? They actually have a different texture than the rest of the leaf too. They're very velvety feeling. And these occur on all leaves within the plant. Typically, the more of them a plant has, the better light it's getting. And it's the thing which makes this plant so unique and so sought after. It's a relatively popular houseplant, and it's not hard to see why. If you want to grow them very tall and you want the leaves to grow very big, I would actually advise training them up a trellis or some sort of pole. You can buy those sorts of things on Amazon or on Etsy if they interest you. That's what I plan to do with this one. This one actually recently got what's called leggy. So there was a lot of space between on the vine, you can see here. The space where leaves occur has these little bumps, and this is common on most houseplants. And that is a growing node. So that's a place where the stem has the potential to split into roots, like you can see, as well as leaves. So what I did was I cut many of the stems between the nodes and placed them in water. So you can see here what it looked like. It doesn't stop the plant from growing, it just causes it to grow in a different direction. And it causes the plant's energy to focus back on the main plant and the main root system. So hopefully it will focus its growth more here and less out here, which is the look I'm going for. I'm also going to be putting it on a trellis very soon so it can climb up, because that is what these plants like to do in the wild. It's something they're very good at, and it makes them very happy. The cuttings I took from this plant I actually gave to a friend of mine who's growing his plant collection, so they went to a very good home. The specific epithet pictus, and as part of this plant's name, Scindapsus pictus, actually means painted, referring to the variegation on the leaves that we saw earlier. has a minimum temperature tolerance of 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and is cultivated as a houseplant in temperate regions like mine. There, the plant typically grows 90 centimeters in height approximately. The cultivar Argyraeus has gained the Royal Horticultural Society's Award of Garden Merit, which I mentioned earlier, which award plants that do well in the United Kingdom's indoor growing conditions. So this plant, like the others we've looked at, is considered relatively easy to grow indoors. Okay, this one also likes a good misting now and again, so let's give it what it likes. And let's move to our next plant. So this is one of the stars of my collection right now. This is a Philodendron mikins. So as you may be able to tell from the leaf shape and its general appearance, it's in the same family as the plant we just looked at. It's a philodendron, which is a large genus in the plant family of the Dracaena family, which is the same family as the silver pothos, which we just looked at. The thing that makes this plant unique from a lot of plants you may see in store is the texture of the leaves. It has this lovely, deep, soft, velvety quality. The leaves tend to be dark green with this signature veining and have that really interesting texture, which makes them very sought after. There are a lot of different types of philodendron, and they can look very different. This one most closely resembles its cousin, the heartleaf philodendron, which many of you may have seen either in homes or in stores without knowing it. It's extremely common. Like I said, the thing that sets this one apart is the slight red undertone to their leaves, which you may be able to see here. So you can see that the back of the leaf almost has a red or a purple tone to it. And then on the front, this deep, rich green with that velvety texture. That's what really makes this plant unique and makes it very highly sought after among plant people. Just like the Scindapsus we saw, these plants love to climb, so I've got it on this beautiful circular brass trellis here. I'll move it a bit farther back from the camera so you can get a better idea. The plant actually came to me as a few very sad cuttings in the mail, and as such we were able to revive it, and it's been doing quite well. But I think maybe it's getting a little bit too stressed out in the sun, so I have plans to move it to a little bit calmer environment very soon. You can also see a few spots on the leaves, there and just there. That tends to happen due to inconsistent watering, and I'll be the first to admit, I sometimes am not the best at remembering to water my plants with exactly the same amount of water, exactly the same time of day on Saturday every single week. And this is a pick your tropical plant, you know, it has the right to get mad at me for that. I knew what I signed up for when I got it, but overall, things considered, this one's still a pretty easygoing guy. Very beautiful, and like I said, I absolutely love it. That texture is just out of this world. Okay, let's set this one aside and move on to the next. Okay, so this is a Peperomia Hope. Peperomias are a very common genus of houseplant. You may have also heard them called the radiator plant. And they are one of two large genera in the family Peperaceae. Peperaceae? I'm never quite sure how to pronounce that. Most of them are compact, small perennial epiphytes. That means they sort of grow on trees without needing to be directly embedded in the soil. And they typically grow on rotten wood in the wild. There are more than 1,500 species that have been recorded, occurring all in tropical and subtropical regions of the world, mostly concentrated in Central America and Northern South America. A limited number of species, around 17, are found in Africa. This is actually a dwarf species. This is Peperomia Hope, or Peperomia obtusifolia minima, and it's a little plant which reaches half the size of a standard peperomia. It's a small plant and grows up to 8 inches, around 12 inches high maximum. You can see we're starting to get some of that height here and here. It likes to sort of vine and trail. It's also called a 4-leaf clover plant because of the way that it grows. You can see these little end branches here almost look like 4-leaf clovers. That's why it's called Hope. It's considered very lucky. Its compact size makes it perfect for dish gardens or desktops. I actually have plans to move this into a succulent bowl later this month. A very important thing to know as a plant parent is that in growing season, or the start of growing season, so around this time, mid-March, early April, that's when you really want to be repotting your plants. Not to say you can't do it other times of year, but this is the time where it's going to be easiest for them to handle that transition. So I'm going to move this guy to a slightly bigger pot so it'll have a little bit more room to grow, but it's not going to get much bigger than this, so I don't want to give it too much room if it's not going to use it. This is actually a succulent, believe it or not, and unlike most succulents, it actually likes a little bit higher humidity, but like most succulents, it is still really intolerant of overwatering, so you really have to be careful with how much you're watering this plant. That is why, while you can't see it, it's a little bit difficult to show, this outer pot, which actually does not have a drainage hole in the bottom, is actually just a shell for the smaller pot inside, which actually houses the plant and does have good drainage. That way I don't have to worry as much about overwatering. A good way to tell when your peperomia needs to be watered is to sort of squeeze the leaf. Squeeze one of the leaves like this. You can see it's not bending. If it does bend, that means it is dehydrated and it would like some water. But this one just got watered on Saturday, so he's okay. This plant has soft, trailing stems, delicate leaves, and it makes it ideal for hanging baskets, as I said, dish gardens or potted indoor houseplants. Since they have a compact form, they can also easily occupy small spaces. They're also quite easy to propagate, so if you want to take stem cuttings and then divide it into smaller plants or make more plants, it's very easy to do that with this plant, and they're very well known for tolerating that well. While there are more than 1,000 types of peperomia in the world, not all of them are actually cultivated for the public. And a fun story, I actually found this plant in the florist section of my local grocery store. It was quite unexpected since I feel like I see people in plant forums looking for this plant all the time. So when I saw it, I was so taken by it, I had to take it home with me. And it has been just thriving in a windowsill ever since. It's been doing very happily, and I'm very proud of it. Alright, let's give this one a very light misting, and we can move on to the next. Okay, so I'm not sure how much you guys are going to be able to see of this plant based on just the camera angles, but I'll do my best. So this is a plant which I love very much. You can see all that rich color and foliage. And she's a big girl too. So this is a pink variegated ruby rubber plant, also known as a Ficus elastica variegata burgundy. It is also known as the Ficus elastica, the rubber fig, the rubber bush, the rubber tree, rubber plant, Indian rubber bush, Indian rubber tree, and is a species of plant in the fig genus. It's native to eastern parts of South Asia and in Southeast Asia, and has become naturalized in Sri Lanka, the West Indies, and the United States state of Florida. It's a large tree in the banyan group of figs growing up to 30 to 40 meters, 98 to 131 feet tall, and in some cases it can grow up to 60 meters tall. And in those cases it can have a trunk as wide as 6.6 feet in diameter, or 2 meters. The trunk develops aerial buttressing roots to anchor in the soil or otherwise support large branches. You can see some of those little aerial roots sort of spidering out along the bottom of the plant in the pot here. If I can get you a good angle on that, there we go. You can see down at the bottom there. Though it starts out with smaller shrub-like growth, it does mature into a full tree as it gets older. It has broad, shiny oval leaves, 10 to 35 centimeters and long and 5 to 15 centimeters broad. The leaf size is actually the largest on younger trees, and the leaves tend to get smaller as the trees get bigger. Inside a sheath, like this one. And so that sheath will grow bigger as the leaf gets ready to sort of burst out. And when that does happen, it will look a little something like this. So you can see that little papery thing coming off the back of it there. That is actually the sheath that wraps the other one. So inside is a full leaf. And inside that leaf again, there is a smaller sheath waiting to form a new leaf after the new one grows. And so when the new leaf is fully ready for it, that little papery sheath will just drop off, become part of the soil, and fully enrich the plant again. And the cycle continues over and over. Color in this variety is actually most intense on new leaves, as you may be able to tell from this top section. And the color on the leaves fades to a creamier pinky white as the leaves get older and more mature. This was another plant I was sort of like the Dracaena, always convinced was going to just be the way it was. I'd gotten it from a local florist, brought it home, cared for it exactly as the instructions on the label said, and it put out one tiny new leaf, and that was it. It just sort of stayed the same. It wasn't dying, but it also wasn't doing very well. So I just sort of thought, okay, that's the way it's always going to be. But just like the Dracaena, what ended up happening was, it followed me when I moved this past August, and I just sort of placed it somewhere in my living room just to put it somewhere while I figured the rest of the move out. And when I felt like as soon as I turned around, it came back and it was just putting out new leaf after new leaf, and these huge, big, beautiful leaves too, filled with all of this color and variegation. The plant went from doing nothing to doubling in size in less than 3 months. And based on how quickly growing season has arrived and how big these new leaf sheaths are, it looks like it's about to do it again. So I'm very proud of her, and I can't wait to see what she has in store for us. Alright, so we'll give this one a hearty misting, and we'll move on to the next. Okay, and so our next plant of the evening is actually a mini Phalaenopsis Orchid. So many of you may have seen orchids in grocery stores during Easter season or at hotels that you visited, or even, out in the wild somewhere. And one thing, if you notice that, if you have seen them in the wild, they are not usually this size. This is actually a dwarf variety or a mini Phalaenopsis orchid. And one thing to note is that the center of these flowers look a lot different from other Phalaenopsis orchids that you might be used to seeing. What's different about this Phalaenopsis is this little section called the lip in the center of the flower. And for this type of orchid, that tends to be the part that has the most vibrant color. I did not realize this, but apparently larger lips in orchids are very trendy right now. So this is actually called a fat lip orchid. It's a 2021 genus, and it was sort of just released onto the market. People find it very attractive. So I was able to pick it up at my local Home Depot, and I brought it home. It did drop a few of these lovely little buds that you can see it has. But overall, it's been getting soaked in water once a week, misted on the sort of midway through the week, and it's been doing very well in an east-facing window, southeast-facing window, I should say. One thing that's very important to note about orchids is you don't actually put them in soil. So you can see here that this is not dirt. Instead, it's a specific type of moss called sphagnum moss. And typically orchids are grown in that or in what's called orchid bark or orchid medium. And that is just a lot of bark and wood chips and things like that. Because in the wild, these things actually grow on trees. And I didn't realize that. I'd always just heard, okay, it's an epiphyte, that means something. But about 2 years ago, I was in Key West with my family on a week-long trip, and we kept seeing what looked like balls of dirt attached to the trunks of palm trees. And we were sort of scratching our heads wondering, well, what's going on with that? Why is that happening? Why are those there? And then one day, it hit me because I saw an orchid in bloom coming out of one of those dirt balls attached to a palm tree. And I stopped my family and I was like, hey, look, that's what those are for. And that really helped me to envision exactly how these things grow in the wild and sort of the conditions that they're looking for to be most happy in our homes. It's like a lot of water to run over them really quickly, just like if they were getting absolutely covered with rain in a South Florida rainstorm attached to the trunk of a tree. So it doesn't like to sit in soil because it's not meant for that. It's not going to grow in dirt. It's going to grow on the side of a tree. And epiphytes, I should specify, are types of plants that grow on other plants that are not parasitic. So this is an epiphyte. A few of the other plants you've heard me mention tonight are epiphytes, like the Peperomia Hope. And that means that in a lot of cases they grow on sort of, old tree bark, or they sort of live on the waste or cast off of another plant. And that allows them to grow, and it gets rid of some of the older dying matter from another plant. So it all works out very efficiently. They do best, as I said, in conditions that mimic growing on the trunk of a tree, kind of shaded like the leaves of a tree might give them. And they like I said, a lot of water running over their roots. They don't like to sit in water. They also, unlike a common myth says, do not like to have an ice cube put above their roots. If you think about it, no ice occurs in Key West or in the tropics. So really, all you're going to do with that is, sure, you're going to give it the same amount of water every time, but you're going to cause the plant to go into shock because you're giving it something that is unnatural for it. So really what you should do is you should mist it once a week with lukewarm water, and you should water it once a week with room temperature filtered water. Let it sit in about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch of water. I typically do for about 30 to 45 minutes for a plant of this size, and that allows the roots to soak up any extra moisture they may want. Then you let it sort of sit on a paper towel and drain off the excess water. Put it back inside its outer pot, and put it back on its windowsill. I'm not an expert in orchids. I've got a lot of friends who know a lot more than I do, and I rely a lot on them for support. So I'm very happy with how this one has been going so far. I was very nervous that I wouldn't be able to give it a good home. But so far it's been doing pretty well, so I'll keep you guys posted if that changes. Okay. Now, an important thing to note for orchids is that you don't want to mist the flowers. Instead, you want to mist the leaves and where you might be able to see some of the roots coming out of the top of the plant. That's where it soaks up water, and so that's where it's going to like to get misted. So I'm going to do that now. Just very gently. And we'll put this back off to the side and move on to our next plant. This is the silver panda plant, also known as the Calancho tomentosa, or panda plant, and it's a succulent with long rabbit ear-shaped leaves covered in these fine silvery hairs. And I don't know about you guys, but I am just a sucker for fuzzy plants. I think that they are the coolest thing, and the texture on this guy is unreal. It is so interesting. It has the same care as other succulents. Be careful not to overwater. It likes a lot of direct sun. I actually got this little guy in a very bougie plant store in my city. I had popped in there just to sort of see what they had. I was looking for a specific plant care item, which they didn't end up having. But I saw this little guy and I just fell in love. I had to have it. So I paid the admittedly very high price tag and I took him home. And he has been living in a southwest facing window ever since, just getting drenched in that bright, warm afternoon golden hour sunlight and just soaking it up. I actually recently also got another itty bitty tiny one from Home Depot, but that one is in rougher shape, so I'm not going to show it tonight. It got really overwatered in the store, which means unlike these leaves, which are standing sort of upright or semi-upright, the leaves on that one are just drooping over. And you can tell that that means it got waterlogged somewhere along its journey to me. So right now it is currently sitting under a grow light in my living room, getting a lot of that light in the afternoon as well as all throughout the day from the artificial light. And hopefully it dries out and is able to make a full recovery. It's been a fun little rescue project. I'm normally not very big into succulents. I find that they don't tend to do very well in my home. Succulents being easy is kind of a myth, but that's another video. So really what I tend to gravitate towards is more tropical plants or plants like a little bit higher humidity, because that's what I've sort of developed to give them in my home. I will say the texture of this is just so nice. I don't think you'll be able to hear it, but I'll take it up to the mic anyway. It is so nice, you guys. Like, look at it. Who wouldn't want to take this little guy home with them? It's so cute. Okay, and let's move on to our next plant. Okay, and so next up is a very trendy plant. This is a Philodendron Birkin, and if you have followed anyone on Instagram who's into plants in the last year to 2 years, you've probably seen them bring home or talk about one of these little guys. They're tropical plants in the same family as the Philodendron mikins that we were talking about earlier, and they're part of that large genus of plants I was talking about in the Dracaena family. There are tons of different types of philodendron, and they can look really, really different, but their care tends to be mostly the same. Bright indirect light, plants with variegation, like this one, needing a little bit higher light, and plants with no variegation, like the mikins we looked at earlier, needing a little bit lower light. So the thing that makes this plant really interesting is that variegation. I mean, look at that white veining. So you can see here and just here. That white veining that's so striking that everybody loves on this plant. And it's strongest on newer leaves. These two are ones it's just put out while it's in my care. And that will actually fade as the leaves get older, so you can see it's a lot fainter on the other ones around sort of the base of the plant. And what happens is as the leaves mature, they develop more chlorophyll, and that is the green pigment in plants that gives them their color and allows them to photosynthesize. So you have to be very careful with plants of this genus. I was very worried that this was going to be an all-white leaf. And that's a problem because white leaves on philodendrons don't tend to stick around for very long. They tend to be very pretty. You take a couple photos, you put them on Instagram, and then because they have no chlorophyll, they can't make energy for the plant. So eventually the plant stops putting energy into it and it just withers away. But it looks like we were able to avoid that with this one, and it's going to mature and develop just fine. Plants like this enjoy bright indirect light. I've got this one a few feet away from a southeast facing window. The lighter the leaves, the more sun the plant is getting. And like I said, just be careful of all white leaves. Very pretty, but not very practical. I got this plant from a very, very cool local plant store in my city. They also sell locally made pottery, which is how I got this pot for it. Okay, so like I said, this one also likes a little bit higher humidity, so we're going to give it a nice misting and move on to our next plant. Okay, so our next plant is actually one of my favorites. So what we're going to talk about next is a family of plants called Hoyas. And they are also called the wax plant or porcelain flower plant. And you can see these ones have got some really cool variegation on them. All that white and green is really lovely. And I'm also going to show you guys how I got this plant. So I got this plant actually as cuttings, just like these. You can see, I hope, the little roots that are growing within this little vase. So just like with the silver pothos, what you do is you cut between the nodes of a really long vine, ideally on the plant, and you divide that up into multiple cuttings, and you put it in water, and you wait for it to grow roots at the bottom. And so this was another one that I had sort of helped a friend rescue, and in return they gave me some cuttings of it. So I was able to take those cuttings, put them in water, wait and watch them grow, and now they're potted in soil. So there are actually two really distinct, or there are many, I should say, distinct kinds of Hoya, but the two most common ones are what are called Hoya Carnosa. And there's two variations. One is the Crimson Princess, which we have here. And you can tell it's a princess because the leaves are green at the edges and white in the middle. And another kind called the Crimson Queen, which I have a plant is in my house, but is a little too big to show you. I don't know if it'll fit on camera with this setup. And that one, the Crimson Queen, tends to have a much darker blue-green leaf, and it is white on the outside and green in the middle. So green centers, queen; white centers, princess. Hoya Carnosa, called the porcelain flower or wax plant, is an Asclepiad species of flowering plant in the dogbane family, Apocynaceae. It is one of the many species of Hoya which are native to Eastern Asia and Australia. It's a common houseplant, known for its attractive waxy foliage and sweetly scented flowers. It's typically grown in pots, like I have here, and in hanging baskets. Hoya Carnosa has been in cultivation now for more than 200 years and has given rise to many cultivars that vary in foliage, form, or flower color. Just like some of the other plants we've mentioned tonight, it's also won the Royal Horticultural Society's Award of Garden Merit. Hoya Carnosa makes faintly succulent shoots with smooth, pale gray, bare surfaces that twine and climb. The perennial leaves are stalked with about 1.5 centimeters long stems. The blade is very wide, oval to longitudinal oval or heart-shaped. The leaves are slightly succulent with a fleshy, waxy, or glossy surface. The leaves, ovate or elliptical, are typically 3 to 5 centimeters wide and 3.5 to 13 centimeters long, with a petiole of about 1 to 1.5 centimeters. The spindle-shaped fruits it produces measure 6 to 10 centimeters. There are many different types of Hoya, all in different colors, leaf shapes, forms, and sizes, but they all love to vine and climb and generally prefer bright and direct light. So you can see here, this one has put out a few new leaves which are all green, And that actually has me a little bit concerned because that typically means that this plant is not getting enough light. So I think I'm going to have to move some things around in my growing setup and figure out a better place for this little guy to live so it's getting enough light as we go into the growing season. My plants just bring me so much joy in my life, and I love feeling like I'm living in a greenhouse. They give me something to fuss over when I'm feeling anxious or overwhelmed. It's so nice to feel like you help something grow and thrive in the world and that you made a difference in some small way to some small creature. They just make me really happy, and I'm glad I got to share that with you guys. Okay, and that's all for tonight, guys. I hope you enjoyed learning about plants with me. If you did, please let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, goodbye and sweet dreams. I'll see you later.